Okay, good morning everyone and welcome. Yeah, welcome to this morning's Scrutiny Committee External. With any apologies?
We have apologies from Councillor Coleman and from Councillor Grant, Convener.
And maybe before we go on, I'll introduce everyone to the Police Committee. Myself, I'm John Blackwood, I'm the Convener. We have David Aitchison, Councillor Aitchison, Deputy Provost Ritchie, Councillor Balfour, Councillor McCluckie, and Councillor Murtagh, who is the portfolio holder for public protection. She's joining the meeting today. We also have Sophie Dick, who is a graduate and assisting us in the meeting today, and we have Brian Perry. Could I ask if there any declaration of interest? No. I take the agenda item 3, the minute of the meeting held on the 11th of December. Agree as a 3-minute of the meeting. Agreed. Thank you. Okay, that takes us to agenda item 4, East Scotland Falkirk Area Performance. Brian, you're going to do an overview in this.
Thank you, Convener. I'm really pleased to have the opportunity to present.
Craig, sorry, Craig.
It's okay. It's okay.
Okay. Yeah. Right. Sorry, Craig. On you go. My apologies. Do you maybe want to introduce your team first?
Yeah. Sorry. I'm with Superintendent Mandy Patterson, who'll assist me. There's a couple of areas that I'll bring her in today to speak about, and also Alan Imbrie from Performance Support within Forth Valley is also listening in today and will help note any points or things that we need to take back to you after the meeting. If there's areas or questions that we can't resolve during it, then he'll assist in noting that, and then we can come back to you on it. Okay, thank you. I'm really pleased to have the opportunity to present the police performance report for Falkirk. It's my first opportunity to present such a report, having been in post since March 2021. I'd like to thank my predecessor, Chief Inspector Chris Stewart, who oversaw the majority of the time that this report relates to and was responsible for the directing day-to-day activities of local officers and responding to the concerns of the local communities. I come to the role of Area Commander at Falkirk with a broad breadth of police experience in a number of areas, and it's my privilege to take on this role. Most of my policing service has been in the north of Glasgow, with recent roles working as Community Inspector in Maryhill and in Kirkintilloch. I was fortunate enough many years ago to work nationally prior to the formation of Police Scotland, and worked in all legacy forces, gaining an appreciation of the diverse nature of policing and how services are delivered in Scotland within cities, towns and villages. Immediately prior to being posted at Falkirk, I was Area Commander at Glasgow City Centre, which is where I started out policing career 28 years ago. I believe that I can always make better decisions on a day-to-day basis when I understand the area in which I'm working. And my early thoughts after being appointed to Falkirk is just what I spoke about there, a large and diverse area which requires local officers to have an in-depth understanding of the different challenges and how the resources available to them, both internally and externally through partners, and gaining the cooperation of the public can be used to make a difference to our local communities. Ultimately, it improves their safety and well-being. Whilst I'm working towards gaining understanding, I'm satisfied that the officers and staff working at Falkirk understand the local communities, and it's my role to try and support and direct them as required. I've made efforts since I came here to get out and about as much as I can, and will continue to do so. It's important for me to have the opportunity to see firsthand the area I'm responsible for, and over time I'll get to see most of these areas. I'm a keen cyclist and so plan to be out on the police bike as well on occasion, which I find is often the best way to get about an area. I've also made contact with elected members since I came here. I managed to meet some of you and I've been in email contact with others, and it's important for me because it provides a valuable insight into some of the challenges that we have. I'll always endeavour to provide comprehensive updates on any matters that are raised once I've had the opportunity to make inquiries into it, and sometimes this might involve directing further action if that's required. So the Falkirk Police Performance Report I'm going to present covers the period April 2020 to March 2021, takes us back into a kind of standard reporting timescale. And I appreciate that you all have had a chance to read the report, including the public satisfaction survey and performance information contained at the rear. And it's my intention just to provide an overview of the report while highlighting some of the activities that we've undertaken in pursuance of the priorities identified in the local plan. Those are responsive to the concerns of our communities, enhancing our collective resilience to emerging risks, protecting people most at risk from harm, promoting confidence through our actions, and road safety and road crime. As I say, as I go through, Superintendent Pettigrew will provide some updates on aspects relating to wider partnership activities, and I'm happy to take any questions that you may have, and where the answers may involve more detailed response, then we'll of course get back to you after the meeting. The background of the report is set in that of a global pandemic that has seen all public bodies having to be agile and consider new ways to deliver a variety of services. And we've seen some fairly dark, prolonged periods of lockdown, limitation of freedoms that we have perhaps taken for granted. People living their lives indoors, less people out in our public places, closures of shops and licensed premises, and the wealth, health and well-being of our communities being impacted on in a way that few of us could have imagined. We've seen glimmers of life returning back to some form of normality during this period, just then for restrictions to be tightened again, so a particularly difficult period for all. I'd like to pay credit to the officers and staff who have continued to deliver services and have ensured that our communities have received the support and assistance they need. We've had to amend the way we work to protect the most vulnerable in our communities and at the same time protect our own staff, ensuring that we retain the resilience to respond throughout this period. At this stage, I'd like to bring in Superintendent Pettigrew to provide an update on public health aspect of our recent operations.
Okay, morning folks. Really pleased to get the opportunity to speak to you all at Scrutiny this morning, and nice to see some familiar faces from when I held Craig's role, what seems like only yesterday, but I know it's obviously over 4 years ago now. Just to kind of bring a bit of context round about the COVID piece and how policing has fitted in, just to get your awareness. So from October in last year, Graham Foster, the Director of Public Health, had asked if I would chair the local resilience partnership meeting to tackle COVID, to obviously give health the ability to think through all the questions that came up during the meetings. So on a daily basis, Monday to Friday, I chaired the local resilience partnership from October to December, and then twice weekly from the new year onwards. For the Falkirk area, we had representation from environmental health officers. Lynn Bissett has been very active within the group. We've also had David Mackay, Head of Education, and various other attendees, just to make sure whenever there have been outbreaks locally, and obviously we've seen them across the board, peaks at points in the Denny Bonnybridge area, obviously outbreaks in the back of Christmas time down in the Bowness area. But what the meeting seeks to do, and has done over the last 6 months, is basically look at where there are outbreaks to make sure they are managed in terms of testing going forward. So we've obviously had the standalone service at Abbotsford House. There have been mobile testing units put up across the whole of the Forth Valley Health Board area, but focused in Falkirk areas as and when it's been appropriate. Obviously, just as recently as this week, there's been a mobile testing unit for a couple of days into Slamanan, just to help manage incidents within the local school area there. But their meeting is particularly responsive. As soon as there are outbreaks which are of a concern in terms of spread, then there are incident management team meetings set up, and all the relevant partners to make sure, as I say, we put in testing. The vaccination programme appears to be a superb arrangement that's in place. Having been vaccinated due to my age group, I have to say what a slick meeting it's been. I think I was in and out in half an hour. And that was including my waiting time. So the vaccination programme has gone really, really well for the Forth Valley area. And to complement that, we've also had meetings with Housing, Alcohol and Drug Partnership, as and when we've felt there have been particular challenges round about COVID. Craig will touch on vulnerability going forward, but I guess what we've got to all recognise, and policing is not exempt from this, we've worked in circumstances that I've never seen in 28 years in policing, and all partners have been working full tilt for a year in a way that isn't what we're used to. And while we've all done really, really well, probably just a bit that we'll need to look after everybody as we go forward, because it has been a difficult year, but a fantastic effort, I would have to say, from all partners who've contributed to the COVID effort. And thanks to yourselves as well, because I know there have been queries and briefings requested to make sure that you are as cited as you possibly can be on the pandemic. But that's it for me, and I'll hand back to Craig, and happy to take questions at the end.
Okay, thank you, Mark. As I go through the report, I'll outline some of the performance information which is relevant. The performance figures are, of course, impacted on by the pandemic, and part of our challenge will be to try and understand how this makes the information insightful so that it can inform our future operations. There's not really a comparable period to compare some of the information, and I'll try to add this context to it as I go through. So in terms of being responsive to the concerns of our communities, our primary role continues to be keeping our communities safe by listening to the public and acting on local issues. We do this best when we work in partnership with others, directly assisting our partnership approach. Within Falkirk Council are 2 officers who perform the role of the Police Local Authority Liaison Officer, the LALO, and an officer embedded in Falkirk Council within the Conflict Resolution Service dealing with antisocial behaviour complaints. The LALO is an integral part of the local morning scrutiny meetings that I have here, and he reviews all incidents from the previous day, reporting what is in progress or what can be done to resolve long-standing or emerging issues. Quite often this might be neighbour disputes which are escalating. The LALO makes referrals to other services in respect of antisocial behaviour, drug and alcohol misuse, homelessness, crime and safety. And the officer embedded within Falkirk Council assists with applications for antisocial behaviour orders where required, and he's responsible for cases where persons have been convicted of misuse or drugs offences, and if these relate or where these relate to Falkirk Council tenancies. So examples of how we've responded to our communities are included in the report, but include 4 reports, the HGV working group. This was to address growing concerns in relation to issues arising from the overnight parking of HGVs in the Grangemouth area. A working group was established with representation from the local community policing team. Whilst awaiting a long-term solution, haulage firms have been contacted directly by the local community team to highlight concerns and discuss alternative solutions. It's recently been confirmed that plans are in place for an HGV parking area to be created at Hull Flats Road in Grangemouth, which will replace the existing temporary arrangement at Union Road car park. This should take HGVs away from the town centre and in turn hopefully reduce associated complaints with noise, etc. Antisocial behaviour is another regular area of concern amongst the local community. Police Scotland and we here in Falkirk recognise that individuals have the right to live in peace and safety, free from all aspects of antisocial and criminal behaviour. Police in Falkirk are committed to effectively tackling and preventing antisocial behaviour in order to safeguard the future well-being of our communities. And whilst there have been restrictions on officers, we have been involved in a number of initiatives and work with partners to engage with the community in a positive and proactive way. 2 examples are listed in the report, which I'll not go into in great detail here. The performance figures for antisocial behaviour are not currently available, as outlined towards the end of the report. But we have seen some dramatic changes throughout the period of the pandemic, with complaints out of doors moving to complaints indoors, often linked to concerns about coronavirus regulations. I have been able to look at management information for the start of this year, from the 29th of March to the 16th of May, where we've had a total of 1,710 incidents, which is very close to the 5-year average. And that's in comparison to 2,545 in the same period last year. And this would suggest to me, looking at it, that there is a return to the kind of more normal levels of reporting in relation to antisocial behaviour. But clearly when we see the full information, and probably a year period is a long time to assess it. We maybe need to look at it in smaller chunks because of the amount of changes that happened throughout that year. In terms of youth worker engagement, due to COVID restrictions, local youth clubs have not been able to attend, or people will not be able to attend local youth clubs and other diversionary activities. In order to establish where young people are congregating in the absence of such clubs, an exercise was undertaken by Falkirk Council Youth Development Workers. Local police teams here engage with the workers and share their local knowledge of emerging problematic areas with the street workers, so that allow them to map where these areas are. And moving forward, this will assist us in deploying resources to the correct areas and at the correct times. Other examples have included our assistance within Zetland Park regeneration project through an increase in antisocial behaviour there. And the aim is to address this behaviour and encourage responsible use of our green spaces. In recent months, officers have been joined by specialist departments in this area. Mounted section have carried out joint patrols there, and Falkirk Council staff, fire and rescue services as well have helped us. And this is a tactic we continue to use. We're using it again this weekend in relation to some antisocial behaviour issues round about the Stenhouse Muir area, and we can get support from some of these specialist services when we bid for them, and we can put a case to them. Community officers are currently liaising with the regeneration project in regards to creating some diversionary activity at the new bike track, which may involve input from Grangemouth High School Art Department, and that's work in progress. Whilst we take every opportunity to promote crime prevention, community officers carried out security marking and offered crime prevention advice to pupils and residents living nearby Braes and Grangemouth High Schools. And over this period, we marked 56 bikes with security markers using the tamper-proof stickers, and we're planning some further events at Zetland Park and at Bowness Academy. Within Falkirk Town Centre itself, the community officers ran Operation Christmas over the festive period, and this was a high visibility policing operation in Falkirk Town Centre to detect and deter acquisitive crime. And we involved officers from other areas of policing and worked in collaboration with Falkirk Safer Streets initiatives, the local bid, council, street pastors, Safe Base and the Howgate Shopping Centre, bringing in local CCTV as well. And the operation consisted of high visibility foot patrols and engagement with the partner agencies. We handed out safety advice leaflets, purse bells, reflective safety stickers and bank card protectors. Clearly this operation wasn't in the same scale as it has been in previous years, but is one we'll again use hopefully in the forthcoming year when we may have returned to that level of normality that I spoke about. We've continued to liaise with partners towards the reopening of services within Falkirk Town Centre, and that's work that's really in progress just now. And particularly with the current changes, we'll move towards our weekend town centre plan again, working with our partners to provide that bit of public reassurance, particularly in relation to the nighttime economy, to the people that are working in the town and to people that are going to be visiting it. And that's something that will flex as times start to increase for pubs and potentially clubs opening at some point in the future. We're also aware the impact that vehicle crime and housebreaking can have in communities. The total number of recorded housebreakings, including attempts to dwellings and non-dwellings in Falkirk, dropped this year to 195 from 404 the previous year, and then at the same time a drop in reported vehicle crime from 332 to 205 during the same period. Restrictions over the last year have clearly influenced these figures, with more people being at home, resulting in less opportunities for housebreaking and vehicle crime being greatly reduced. There'll also have been less opportunity for travelling criminals, people who would travel into this area to commit crime with the restrictions that were in place. So clearly, whilst these figures are welcoming in terms of less victims of crime, I think they need to be looked at in terms of the policing that we've done and how we've been living through the pandemic, and clearly the potential for these figures to increase as people start to move about again is there. In terms of drug dealing and misuse, it's recognised as a concern which has far-reaching social, economic and health consequences. Its impact on individuals, families and communities, fueling antisocial behaviour, violence and acquisitive crime are really well known. And the issue of drug misuse, profit, lifestyle that can be made through the sale of drugs and the misery it brings on communities is something that we're all aware of. Local communities and local officers respond to concerns raised from a number of sources by developing intelligence leading to the execution of search warrants, recovery of drugs and proceeds confiscation. Sorry, I'm getting an echo there, Councillor. Is everything still okay?
Yeah, you're okay. I think we're all getting it there.
Okay. It's the recovery of drugs, the confiscation of the proceeds of crime and the arrest of offenders. And we understand it's important that the community see that the information that they're providing and the assistance they're providing us is paying off. And so I like to be visible when we're carrying out these drug warrants where possible, and we'll report progress, what we can, via social media whenever we can. So as well as cash recoveries through the proceeds of crimes legislation, with a recovery of over £730,000 in assets in the last year. And whilst less than the previous year, this resulted partly from the execution of 127 drug warrants in the Falkirk Area Command. That's an increase in the previous 12 months when we executed 82 warrants. And this assisted in the detection of 152 persons for drug supply offences, compared to 126 in the previous year. There's also a more complicated risk assessment process that we had to carry out in relation to coronavirus before we carry out these warrants. So I think carrying out 127 whilst we've been undertaking these enhanced risk assessments to make sure that we are safe and the people we're dealing with are safe is a fair number, and something that I'm quite pleased to report on here. The report includes some of the other examples of the work we've undertaken in this regard, and they're in the report. I'll leave them for yourselves to read. In terms of drug-related deaths across Scotland, it continues to be a concern. And the most recent figures for drug-related deaths for Falkirk are from January 2021 to March 2021, where Falkirk has 9 deaths reported. It should be noted that these figures can, however, change because many of these deaths we have to await lab results and toxicology reports before they can be confirmed if they are drug deaths. Falkirk recorded 9 for the same period in 2020, just for information. From January to December 2020, Falkirk recorded 36 deaths, and for the same period the year before, the total was 40 deaths. It's acknowledged that the police action on drug dealing alone will not resolve what's been a long-standing health and social issue. And later in the report, we have outlined a test of change in relation to 3 areas in Scotland, which is to do with the carriage of naloxone spray by officers. And the 3 areas that were getting tested is Falkirk, East End of Glasgow and Dundee. And for those who maybe aren't aware, naloxone is the emergency first aid response to an opiate overdose. And it reverses the respiratory suppression caused by opioids and can bring people basically back to life by starting to breathe again. This has generally always been provided by ambulance technicians, but this test of change is to see whether, as first responders, we are in a position sometimes to administer that level of first aid care. And the pilot will involve the carriage of it. Officers have been trained and are carrying it voluntarily. It started in March 2021 and will last for 6 months, and it will be independently evaluated at the end of that. So far, there have been 6 uses in Glasgow, 2 in Dundee, and 1 of the uses was in Falkirk. You may have seen some information about that in the Falkirk Herald in terms of how that was used here. And at this stage, I'll ask Superintendent Paddison to come back in again just to provide an update on the wider partnership approach to the issue of drug and alcohol abuse and drug deaths, if that's okay.
Thanks very much, Craig. I don't think you could ever understate how complex the issue of drug-related deaths is in terms of how we can understand how to intervene and support. I guess it's just maybe to give everybody around the table a bit of an understanding as to what meeting forums take place to review drug-related deaths and work towards the prevention piece. So within the division, I chaired a drug-related death review group meeting where we look at different aspects, recognising that policing is obviously, as Craig has touched on, we're not going to enforce our way out of this, but we really need to work in partnership with others to look at how we prevent those going onto the pathway of becoming vulnerable to a drug-related death. And the reasons behind that will not be a surprise to many in terms of the factors that seem to impact on the way, you know, recurring elements round about poverty, mental health, trauma at various stages in life. So hugely complex issues to work through, but we have the divisional meeting. What we've done is I look at what is ongoing around the country to make sure that we're not missing any opportunities to engage in a different way or a better way. So I sit in now on the Glasgow Drug Death Strategy Group just to see what work is ongoing there, what themes they're picking up on. I've also sat in a meeting up in Tayside to look at that. So the multi-agency meeting that we're now going to carry out in the division, which is supported by Elaine Lawler and her team from the ADP, and we'll look to involve partners from housing, outreach services, NHS. Our first meeting will be next Friday, but probably just be a springboard to look at what membership should look like and what pieces of work we can carry out collectively. It's a really complex issue. Craig's provided the statistics as we have them at the moment for the Falkirk area. The reality is some of our individuals who can be vulnerable to drug-related death are sometimes transient in nature. So we don't have particular themes in relation to individuals or parts of Falkirk per se. We do see spikes moving from one local authority area to another, which may be because of the movement that we sometimes see around about those groups. But it's just a guarantee that what we're going to do with the meeting from next Friday is just look at the current challenges across the Forth Valley Health Board area, including Falkirk, and see how we might better coordinate all aspects of the prevention of drug-related death. We just had discussions this week with the ADP round about custody, because obviously we had to bring in mitigation measures round about COVID within the custody environment, which meant that some of the intervention services that had previously been able to visit, how we might reopen that. So that is hopefully going to start up very shortly. But regardless of that, we still continue to put referrals in to hopefully increase the support mechanisms that are available for people. The ADP have taken on new roles and are recruiting for new roles just to improve the coordination of drug-related death, and obviously they work to the Drug Death Task Force, and the strategy for that is available nationally. You can search on that online and see the key elements of that. But as Craig's touched on, Loxone is a test of change, and Falkirk been deployed once, so saving one life is part of what we're all about. So a real positive outcome already in a short space of time. But again, happy to take any questions at the end, recognising that I'm not an expert on the subject. But Craig, back to yourself.
Thank you. Just adding on again to the Loxone, in my previous role as area commander at Glasgow City Centre, we had the issue of dealing with people who were previously homeless getting housed in city centre hotels during the periods of the pandemic. To allow them the opportunity to self-isolate when required, and just to try and safeguard their own well-being. And we saw some of the security staff in and about these hotels being trained to carry naloxone, and they were issuing it quite regularly when they were finding people in need of it before an ambulance was to arrive. So having arrived at Falkirk, very, very pleased that this area has been chosen. And for good reason, that it's been used as a test of change. So I'm keen to support that with the officers, and any good news stories that we get from its use we'll certainly promote, and we'll see what it takes us in terms of that piece of evaluation, which might lead to a national rollout. So in terms of enhancing our collective resilience to emerging threats, we've continued to review these emerging threats and looked for the support of our communities to develop intelligence and understand the nature of the threats. We adopt a partnership approach, as we do for most things, and work together to meet the challenges and mitigate risk. And one of the main examples of this, again, is our approach to policing during the pandemic. Whilst being responsive and receptive to those who are most vulnerable, maintains that confidence within the local community. And we've responded at a time when our actions have centred around people's homes, and that's raised concern in relation to some of our actions and activity around about there. But it adheres to the guidance that was in place, and also in relation to how we engage with people in our green spaces and our beauty spots in a way that we've never done in the past, and trying to maintain that public confidence as we've gone about execution of our duty around about those. You may well have heard about the policing style that was adopted and that we've certainly used in Forth Valley, of the 4 E's, which is engaging with people, explaining, encouraging, and ultimately, if we have to, then enforcement. And that's been crucial to us in terms of working our way through them, that we start off with engaging and we move through it and we enforce only when we have to. It's been central in maintaining the public support of activities. The report also outlines emerging threats of serious and organised crime, counter-terrorism, cybersecurity and wildlife crime. In terms of cybersecurity, in October 2020, a virtual cyber resilience input was provided for members of our multi-agency contest group and Forth Valley Voluntary Sector Group. Unlike some threats, the threat of online security and criminal behaviour can flourish at a time when more people are relying on this type of technology for business and personal use. The purpose of policing is to improve the safety and well-being of people, places and communities. In terms of our priority of protecting people most at risk from harm, we've continued to adopt a partnership approach as the best way to safeguard the most vulnerable. Examples of this have included the DISTAS, the Disclosure Scheme for Domestic Abuse Scotland. The right to ask and the power to tell continues to be an effective tool to safeguard persons sometimes before they can become a victim or re-victimised. Power to tell is used most frequently, and the statistics available continue to rise to 271 across Forth Valley in 2020, with most of these being within the Falkirk area. This is only possible through the accurate recording and sharing of information, and officers in Falkirk contribute to this with a professional and sensitive approach in dealing with domestic incidents, victims, perpetrators and witnesses. Officers in Falkirk engage with their own area experts and those from other agencies in our monthly multi-agency risk assessment conferencing MARAC meetings, where the best routes for safeguarding vulnerable persons are progressed, with actions raised during the meeting for the best persons that are best placed to try and progress them. Other examples are our actions taken to respond to doorstep crime and bogus callers, who often target those perceived to be the most vulnerable within our communities. The impact on victims cannot be underestimated, and it's not unknown for persons to be targeted on several occasions. In review of daily incidents, anything of this nature is prioritised, and where required, we share information with other agencies to prevent persons being re-victimised. Or if we identify a vulnerability in victims, then we look to see who's best placed to try to support them. The Falkirk Police Scotland Youth Volunteers have, like most groups during the pandemic, had to amend how they meet and deliver services whilst looking after each other's wellbeing. And the group had their first deployment in October 2020, when as part of the Darker Nights initiative, they were handing out leaflets in the areas of Bainsford, Camelin and Grangemouth. And it's a valued group to us here who significantly assist us in community activities, and will continue to use them as a valuable asset moving forward. Dealing with vulnerability is unfortunately a growth area for policing, whether it be the slower time multi-agency approach to managing vulnerability or the immediate response required when somebody is in crisis. And we've seen a general increase in calls reporting concern for individuals, which are often amount to over 200 calls a month in the Falkirk area. And these can often be complicated, time-consuming and resource-intensive, involving all stations where there's an immediate threat to life. And this happens probably more regularly than some people would maybe think, that suddenly we have to drop everything, and all available stations are trying to assist with one particular call, and that's to try to protect the life of a person who we have been reported to us as an immediate concern. And once persons are safe, it can also take many hours with police at hospital or with other services before they can be safely released. Between the 1st of April 2020 and the 31st of March 2021, police in Falkirk recorded 1,142 missing person incidents compared to 1,729 from the previous year. And I think it's probably a direct consequence of the pandemic that there's a reduced number of missing persons here, probably down to a reduced ability to travel and go to other people's houses, but still a significant number in terms of our capacity in dealing with these. Each missing person is an investigation that we carry out from the offset with a risk assessment process in place. So it's a significant number of inquiries that we carry out in the Falkirk area. We've also been promoting confidence through our actions in a number of ways, and that included the naloxone test of change I spoke about earlier, and a response to other yearly events. Operation Alamo is listed in the document, which was a response around Halloween and Bonfire Night. This was curtailed this year, but we still led a multi-agency approach to that, and that's something that we'll pick up again for the coming year. Our Safer Communities Unit donated a tablet to the Forth Valley Sensory Centre in Camelin, used to show service users how to contact emergency services. And this includes a text service for those who have hearing difficulties. And it also provides third-party reporting centre training to raise awareness of the third-party reporting of hate crimes and hate incidents. In terms of road safety and road crime, it's also been highlighted as a priority. During the pandemic, there have been periods where the roads have been quieter and times where our beauty spots have come under increased pressure. Blackness is listed in the report as an example of where we've worked with the Community Council and other partners to alleviate increases in traffic in these areas and the associated concerns that come from that in relation to road safety. We've responded to complaints and concerns in areas where road safety is compromised, the person driving above the speed limits. And despite restrictions on how we've been able to operate, officers have detected 915 speeding offences and 80 offences in relation to dangerous driving in the period 1st of April 20 to 31st of March 2021. And this is an increase from 699 speeding offences and 59 dangerous driving offences in the previous year. So that moves me on to the public satisfaction survey, which is at the back of the report. Now, generally, performance for Forth Valley compares very favourable to the first photo in the questions that are asked. There are clearly some anomalies in the attached figures. However, for the current period that we can see there, and it particularly relates to questions 4, 5 and 7, where there's a significant dip in the March figures. As far as we can see, there's no change in the policing approach during this period, and we've not picked up on any other general indicators from elsewhere which would highlight that this is an issue. In questions 5 and 7, Forth Valley Division may not have had the ability to dispatch resources to them and had a limited footprint in the incidents through our contact assessment model, but this is something we need to look into a wee bit further. I think in general it feels, looking at it, a bit of a blip, but it is concerning when you see figures of those levels, particularly compared to force averages, and it's something we'll monitor into the next quarter to see if it's an ongoing issue. Taking in terms of the other statistics, I'll go through some I've mentioned during the report, and I'll add a wee bit of context to them as I go through. So in terms of the Group 1 crimes, which are crimes of violence, it's very, very similar to last year, 267 crimes compared to 265, which is 2 more, with 3 murders in the same reporting period and 5 attempted murders, which is 2 fewer than the year before. Of note below that, at 4 and 5, we're showing 2 for culpable homicide common law and 2 for culpable homicide other. These relate to an industrial accident, and it was one event that relate to both of those sections 4 and 5. The detection rate for serious assault, we've seen a slight increase in that to 85.7%, and at the same time 5 fewer serious assaults. The robbery detection rate has increased to 80.4%, and at the same time we've had 8 fewer robberies in the same reporting period. In terms of common assault, we see an increase in the detection rate for common assault from 73.6% to 77.3%, and in total 207 fewer common assaults in the reporting period. I touched on disorder information. That information is not available just now. I'm sure when that is available, it will be forwarded on to yourself, and I'll make sure that happens. At number 13, domestic incidents, it was quite interesting that when we went into lockdown at first, I think there was a feeling that we would have a significant increase in domestic abuse incidents, similar to perhaps we see at holidays at Christmas, when we have people within premises, within houses for longer periods of time. And we have had an increase there of 4.8% in terms of the number of domestic abuse incidents, but perhaps maybe not the increase that we thought we might have during the entire reported period. Total crimes of offences and domestic abuse incidents reduced slightly from 1,482 to 1,328, and the percentage of domestic incidents that result in a crime being recorded fell from 44.6% to 39.6%. And it's clear here that not every incident of domestic abuse that we get called to is actually a crime. We are encouraging people to report, and sometimes people do report for the very best of reasons, but the actual information they're supplying may not constitute a crime, and that's why we sit at that sort of level in terms of the conversion rate for domestic incidents reported to us to those that we actually record as a crime. The total at number 16, total crimes and offences and domestic abuse incidents. The detection rate is going up to 73.3% from 69.9%, and it's encouraging because the more that we can detect, then the better we can in terms of working with our partners to put in safeguarding measures, and that might be something straightforward as bail conditions from somebody who appears at court, or bail conditions on an undertaking if somebody's arrested. So clearly the higher the percentage rate there, then the better it is for us in terms of safeguarding and protecting those that are vulnerable. The total detection for bail offences sitting there as an increase of 18.4% up to 116, partly down to a proactive bail enforcement. And whilst we were reported into us some breaches of bail, quite a number of these are recorded because of our own activities, and that is proactively managing bail offences, particularly those who are most vulnerable and those offenders who are most likely to reoffend. At number 18 is the domestic abuse and initial bail checks. We have a target of 95% and we're sitting at 86.6%. These are the bail checks that we deliver within 24 hours of a person being released on an undertaking or being released from court with bail conditions or standard bail conditions, and these are delivered to the victim. It's quite a challenging statistic to hit all the time, 95%, because sometimes, as you can understand, we are dealing with victims that don't wish bail conditions applied, don't want to cooperate with the police, and so are quite hard to track down. A lot perhaps not even answer their door or answer their phone when we're trying to contact them to provide them that information and safeguard and check. So 95% is a very, very difficult figure to hit, and we're currently sitting at 86.6%. And it is one that I review on a daily basis here, any outstanding bail compliance checks from the day before, and it's a priority that's tasked out on a daily basis to try and make sure that we comply with that 95% rate. At number 19, hate crime and offence detection rate, there's been a slight fall from 82.9% to 77%. There will be, however, some inquiries that are outstanding in the review period, so that figure might change slightly. And I undertake locally here a review of all hate crime to ensure that all investigative opportunities have been pursued, and that's an extra line of scrutiny on these reports to make sure that there's not a further line that can be pursued before crime reports are ultimately filed and victims are updated. In terms of violence, disorder and antisocial behaviour stop searches, the total number of stop searches carried out within the review period was 947. And this resulted in 438 positive searches, and that's over 46% of persons searched with a positive result. And again, suggests to me that we're using the tool, which is stop and search, we're using it proportionately, given the percentage of positive searches we get from the number that's raised there. At number 21, the number of detections for drug supply, drug production, drug cultivation offences is 152, which is up from 126 in the previous reporting period. I've already spoken about theft by housebreaking, but the detection rate for that is up from 31% to 34.4%. It's a fairly low detection rate, generally housebreaking, because often there's no witnesses and we have to rely on lab analysis, DNA analysis, fingerprint analysis to try and get detections there. It's encouraging certainly that there's an increase in the detection rate for that. And at the same period, we've already spoken about the reduction in the amount of crimes for housebreaking there. Also, a reduction in theft by shoplifting in terms of acquisitive crime, which again perhaps isn't unexpected given that some of our shops have been shut and there have been less people on the street. The detection rate, a slight fall there. The only thing I can think that may have a factor in that is terms of recognising people that are responsible, because people are generally out wearing masks during this period, and quite often we rely on CCTV and officers being able to identify offenders from CCTV, or indeed shops being able to identify people that they know coming in to commit those crimes. At number 26, vandalism and malicious mischief. the detection rate, a slight fall in that there, and at the same time 145 fewer crimes, which again might not be unexpected during the review period. And the number of detections for consuming alcohol in designated places has gone up from 40 in the previous review period to 73, an increase of 33. In terms of public protection, number of sexual crimes in the previous review period, we were at 457, and we're sitting at 295. And trying to put some context round about that, potentially here there's a slowdown in the historic reporting of these offences. This may then see also an increase as restrictions are lifted and people become again more willing to contact the police. So that quite often round about this particular time there'll be a complex number of reasons why these numbers are down. Certainly the historic reporting, and I spoke to our public protection unit before I came just to try to get some context, is that whilst we have had quite a high level of historic reporting, that will not go on forever. And so we would expect to see a slowdown in that, and that might have that factor in why that number is lower. The sexual crime detection rate has gone up by 20.4% to 68.8. And again, the context round about that, with a larger percentage being more recent, it gives us better investigative opportunities through CCTV, through phones, through computer use, and through witnesses who are current and that we can speak to. And that perhaps is an impact on that improvement there. Also, the victim-centred approach that we have, less likely for victims to withdraw their cooperation if we have that victim-centred approach, when we gain their confidence and trust. Rape detection rate, again, is up 9.4%, and probably the context that I gave above is very, very similar to what I would say in terms of the improvement in the rape detection rate figures. Moving on to road traffic casualty statistics, people killed on the roads, unfortunately, we're sitting at 2 this year. There's another 3 deaths, and these were all detailed as medical deaths during this period, and that's the same as it was during the previous reporting period. People have been slightly injured seriously injured on the road has fallen from 34 to 26, and those slightly injured has fallen from 124 to 55, and again a direct consequence, I think, just of less people being on the roads at this time, and I would expect those numbers to potentially increase in the next reporting period. At the same time, we've had no children under 16 killed, and we've had 3 children under 16 seriously injured compared to 6 in the previous period. At number 32, dangerous driving, as I have touched on, has increased from 58 persons detected to 80 in the reporting period, and quite an increase in speeding offences as well, from 699 to 915. There's been a drop in disqualified driving, which seems to be the anomaly here, because when we're detecting people for dangerous driving and speeding, we generally would detect a higher increase in people driving whilst disqualified. Driving without a road licence has gone up from 126 to 156, and also those driving without insurance from 294 to 398. A slight decrease in those detected not wearing seatbelts, and mobile phones, and an increase in 2 in relation to that. In terms of the public confidence and the figures that are there in terms of complaints about the police, it lists the figures from the previous year to the current year, and they're really very, very similar in terms of the numbers. Why we're sitting sometimes with more allegations than complaints is quite often that there can be more than one allegation in any particular complaint, and this relates to both. But again, very, very similar numbers, I would suggest, in terms of both those years. Convener, that completes my update on the Falkirk performance report, and clearly quite happy to take any questions, and I'll try and answer them. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris and Mandy, for your presentation. And obviously, COVID has a major effect on all our lives, and it's obviously had an effect on how we police the country as well. And it's not making life very easy for you. I'm going to open up the questions. Any of the Mr. McCluskey.
Thanks, Convener, for letting me in. I've got a few questions, and as I say, we're here today to they were kind of regular job, and we've been appointed to scrutinise the police, and we'll try to do that as fairly as we can. In the past, you scrutinised me and been very professional the way you done that as well. So as I say, you know, Obams is courteous. The convener, you mentioned the fact that with COVID, and you know, we do get police mentioned a lot of times with our constituents, and I've seen a rise in the number of complaints about the council housing inquiries because we weren't able to do the repairs and do the issues because of the COVID situation, because we're trying to keep staff safe and risk assessments and that, and you've already mentioned that. So I was trying to wonder, how did it affect the front line? You were out in the front line, you know, and we've got to applaud you for that and put yourself at risk. But how did it affect you with people isolating within the police force and carrying out your job? Maybe you can give us more details how you managed to cope during that difficult time.
Yes.
Me to take that one, Craig. Do you want?
Okay, thanks, ma'am.
So, John, throughout the pandemic, the division had a gold group meeting, basically, which was chaired by our commander. So maybe to touch on a couple of aspects of what you've asked, in terms of how we managed incidents as they came in, obviously our control room had to put in a kind of triage system to ask questions of those incidents when people were phoning in to check if there was any risk to the reporters of incidents or to officers who might be attending if there was positive COVID cases within the household that was making the report. And obviously what we had to do was control room looked at a system of making sure that we safely dealt with incidents from both the perspective of attending police officers and for the occupants of the houses who were making reports. So where calls could be dealt with over the phone using the contact assessment model teams, we did take some telephone reports where there was low-level reporting and no real requirement for a police officer to attend in person, so that we were minimising contact and therefore minimising the spread of COVID. In terms of incidents where, as you know, John, regardless of what is going on with a person in terms of their health and COVID, where there's a risk being presented by the nature of the call being made that police require to attend regardless, then there was a lot of work done nationally around about the protection equipment, masks, etc. for our officers, so that when we were walking into an incident where there was a risk of transfer of COVID, that our officers were as protected as they could be. In terms of outbreaks for ourselves, we are the public, we're the police, but we're the public as well. Therefore, the reality is that we have had officers who have tested positive for COVID, which has led to wider self-isolation. We had an outbreak in the October period, and we had a more recent one in the Larbert area. All that we did was, because I was chairing the local resilience partnership meeting, we had fantastic contact with our public health colleagues, and where it was appropriate, there were incident management meetings held. But the reality was, in terms of service delivery, that was never compromised, because we had the ability to get support from our national colleagues to make sure that call demand was still attended to, but that we made sure that those officers who had to self-isolate and protect themselves from becoming positive to COVID did that as quickly as possible to prevent the spread across our division. Does that answer your questions, John?
That answered that question, and I thank you for the diligence and way that professionalism you've done it, just the same as we appreciate the efforts of our NHS staff. But as I say, it seemed to got more mention than yourselves, and so I thought that was an important question, and fully satisfied with the answer. The next question is, it mentions wildlife crime. I brought up this previously, and because I cover obviously a rural area, you know, I got a lot of comments about that, you know, and some of the farmers and and outlying cottages and that report this. You know, they got a bit of hassle in this regard. So in the report it says that we're working with the RSPCA and that to try to deal with that. But I was just trying to find out, have we been making progress during that? It doesn't. It mentions we're looking at it, but that was before. I'm saying, are we making progress and try to reduce it, because it does still go on in my area. People think they have a cultural right to do this sort of thing, you know, and it's illegal. And so, as I say, could you give me an update on that, please, if you've any information available? No.
I'll come in there, but I don't think it might be perhaps a particularly useful update for you just now, but it's one I'll take away. I would like to have a wee look at the wildlife crime that we have recorded, and where those inquiries have progressed and who we tie in with. But it's probably one I would need to do a wee bit of work on and come back to yourself with, Councillor.
No problem at all, sir. It was just I had the benefit, one of the wildlife officers at one of my community councils, and they were saying they were targeting it, and I know that it goes on in some of my villages and just outside my village. So that was just if there were any information, but I'm very happy for you to come at a later date, and if there's any updates on that, I'm happy with that. The next thing is
John, sorry, I can give you a little bit more information round
right,
about
okay,
that.
Mandy.
So rural crime, which obviously takes in wildlife crime, we've got a dedicated wildlife crime officer. So if there are any specific queries, if you want to just pass them on to Craig, and we'll get them sent direct to that officer. We also have the division recently advertised for a rural crime officer. So led by the kind of National Safer Communities team, there is a partnership meeting which runs now. It's the officer who's been appointed as a single point of contact actually works in the rural Stirling area because of the geography out there and
Right.
the higher prevalence out there in terms of rural crime. But that's another avenue which you could feed into, John, if there are any concerns. And again, what I can do is get you the direct contact details, but it's overseen by Inspector Andy Bushell, who's one of the Stirling community inspectors. So if there's anything at all that either of these individuals or forums could help with, then that would probably be a good route for yourself.
I really appreciate that. And also, I forgot to mention, Craig, I'm very happy you've took up the new role. Very difficult role, because Mandy left 4 years ago, and we gave a bit of leeway because we're hard shoes to fill. But as I say, I'm sure you'll fill the shoes, Adam, really. So just to mention that. Another issue is I got a lot of issues about parking. You know, you're right, in the COVID, a lot of people were working from home. There's some of the people, some households here, even council households here, six vans and cars and whatever, seems to be an increasing situation. And I was trying to see if other areas are being suffered, and we've always had a parking issue. And obviously, if you've got two wheels up in the curb, and it's mentioned at the council, they say, "Oh, that's a roads issue." So a police issue. And also the other issue is in road tax. You mentioned other things about insurance and that. People now go online and they look at if somebody's leaving a car for a while and they're causing a bit of obstruction, and they look up. And I've had a few issues where people have tried to report road tax, and they've been a wee bit concerned in the response to coming back from that as an issue. So I'm just trying to see across the board, have we any lessons to learn on partnership approach to deal with one, because we've always had the parking issues in certain bits of wards. You know, people having to, you can go past 30 cars parked with one wheel up, but they've nowhere else to park. You know, I don't think there's solutions to it, but if there is solutions that can improve things that other council areas is enhancing through community partnership working with the council, I would just like to hear for that, so that we can try to improve here as well. So that's my two questions on that.
Councillor, in relation to road issues and parking, it's not an uncommon issue for other areas to have. And it's what falls into, something that is something that would be an offence that the police would pursue if it was something like dangerous parking, to something that is just an inconvenience. And it's what is dangerous parking and what is an inconvenience. Sometimes local communities work together to make sure that it works for them in terms of how they park their vehicles, and understanding that the roads set up and parking doesn't really allow for the amount of vehicles that now people have, as you pointed out yourself. But we will work through our community councils in relation to these issues, and we'll talk to the council. It's not always within our gift, particularly if it's going to be structural change to roads and parking restrictions lifted. But we can certainly put our views forward to council, particularly if it's somewhere that's causing a danger. Would give us a bit more strength to be able to push those forward. But certainly the link for that is through the local councils and through the local community officers who can progress that through the links that they have. In terms of road tax, there is here, I would have to check it, but I know from my previous experience, I'm sure it is here as well, that if we do have reports for road tax, I think that can be done online. And then there's an ability for the vehicles to be clamped and ultimately removed if need be. And it doesn't always fall to the police to go out and deal with every aspect of road tax if somebody hasn't got road tax in a vehicle. And I know people are aware now online that they can check themselves. And I think people are aware that people and their friends or their neighbours can check to see if a vehicle's lawfully taxed and is sitting on a road. But it doesn't always fall to the police to go and deal with every aspect of road tax. But there is that other avenue that people can progress.
My last question, you'll be glad to hear, is on the consultation public satisfaction survey, and we see, obviously that's page 21 of your report, we see 7 subjects here, and we're below obviously the force total in these 7. Is that a sample of 7, or is that all the questions where we're below? Is my first question on that, because clearly we're lower down than what the average is. So that's my first question. I've got other questions on that, but that's my first question on that one.
Yeah,
so the questions that are there.
Right.
Sorry, ma'am.
So the questions that are there, John, are the questions that are asked. In terms of the variance, Craig touched on it. So my sense of it all, we usually compare very favourably to the average returns. And what I wouldn't like to do is read too much into a few months' data, March obviously being the one that stands out, John. So I think the best course of action, to be honest, is simply to monitor where we are. And if we have any concerns, as Craig said, we tend to triangulate these things by, what complaints are we getting against the police? Have they gone up or down? What comes in from yourself? What the sense is from our engagement with the public? And there's nothing within those other aspects where we can gauge, satisfaction that suggests there is a particular concern for Falkirk, but we'll absolutely continue to monitor and take any action if we think there is a concern. And obviously yourselves are key to that feedback. Sorry, Craig.
No problem, as I say, and happy with that. And I also notice a different way the survey's been carried out this, so that could be the difference in maybe the reports. But we didn't see, for previous years there, so just in comparison as well. So maybe if I could note that for the future to see how, is the trend going down or up or whatever. It's just a recommendation, for that. So I would like to add that into it. But on a whole, as I say, things as well with the public. But one issue that I think has increased, and it's perception, and I'm getting different answers when I get feedback from the police. I'm getting a lot of more inquiries than new, as I say, is because folk are uptight about a whole host of things. But the ones that relate to the police, and if there's a bit of discontent, people are saying that they're calling several times. And I was just wondering, have we changed our system and monitoring the calls? Because people are saying that they're contacting the police on several occasions, and yet the officers, when they come back to me, are stating, they've only had 1 call or 2 calls in the last 3 months relating to that. So there seems to be a disparity and so obviously we get that in the council as well. Sometimes a constituent is always telling you their version, and when we speak to the housing officer, it's maybe not the case, but we've got to do that inquiry. So I'm only passing it on as has there been a change in anything we do there other than the contact method for the satisfaction survey, and recording calls, because people are saying that maybe they call more often, and people are saying that the police didn't come out, or and if you're busy, as a priority, it could be a couple of days before you respond to a minor call, but maybe having to come out and these kind of things. So I've seen locally a bit rise on that, and I was just saying, is there any facts to it, or is it just a localized issue that I've been experiencing? So if Craig can answer that, please.
I'll come in on that one, if that's okay. When calls are received, they're certainly through a contact centre, so it shouldn't be a local issue, in terms of how calls are managed. And certainly through the heights of the pandemic, Superintendent Patterson said, we have tried to deal with calls that we might in the past have sent a police response to, but try to deal with them in other means, and that might be over the telephone. In terms of public satisfaction, to do that has actually been dealt with, then perhaps getting that contact by telephone as opposed to that face-to-face contact that they might have had previously will be something that would dissatisfy them. In terms of the kind of the performance of our call centres that sit with the division that manage the call centres themselves, and they look at the calls that come in and have their own performance figures in relation to how quickly those calls are answered and how long those calls are managed for. So I don't have that information at my fingertips, but I'm certainly not aware of any issues. And I think if there were any issues, they'll not be local issues, they'll be national issues, just because of how we manage our calls coming into these contact centres.
I'm very happy with that answer. And as I said, you said in your speech earlier on, the fact is that if police are responding by phone to keep themselves safe and be able to do things, and the number comes up, they didn't ken the number. A lot of people didn't just ignore that number. Maybe that's why, you're doing your bit to try to get back, but maybe the constituents unaware that it's the police, if you can what I mean. So thanks very much for the answers, and thanks, Kieran.
Thank you.
Councillor Baldwin.
Thanks, Convener. I've got a few questions. First one is maybe one you could bring back to the next report. A wee while back, you all got new smart devices. And what I was wondering was, how has this improved performance? And also how you would quantify that. I don't know if that's an answer you can give now, but I'm happy for that to come back to the next report. It'd be quite interesting to see how that's helped matters over the last few years. Okay.
Thanks, Councillor. I think it's maybe a difficult one to quantify, but however, the devices that the people have give them that ability to push and pull information from our systems without actually being sitting in front of a computer. And so when they're at a call, they're out and about, they can be checking their emails, they can be getting calls sent to them, and they can review them. And for me, it's about the ability for our resources to be more visible in their communities. So rather than taking that time to try to get themselves up to speed with what's happening, particularly after days off, then they can immediately do that while sitting within their community and responding to calls and being visible. It allows them to do real-time updates to incidents as well. So again, in terms of supervision, a supervisor can immediately see what has happened in relation to a particular incident and then direct further activities as required, rather than waiting to get that opportunity to speak to somebody, which might then push that further action some way down the line. So there's a number of areas that we can help there. Pictures on these phones as well, in terms of missing people. If there's an immediate need to try to locate somebody, and I mentioned there a bit of vulnerability, then that picture, if we have it, can be pushed out to people's devices. And in a busy area, then we perhaps have a better chance of spotting that person there. So probably be quite a hard one to quantify exactly how it's improved, but certainly from my experience in speaking to the officers, it makes them more agile, more responsive. It makes us quicker at responding. It gets the information in faster, allows us to make better decisions and faster decisions, which ultimately at times might be the difference in the outcome of a serious incident. So, and it's one of the things that have been brought into the police service. When I speak to officers, I don't think I've spoken to anybody that hasn't thought that's been a valuable addition to the things that they have at their disposal on a daily basis.
Okay, that's
I
fine.
think
That's
as
encouraging.
just to add some context, I kind of oversaw the implementation of the mobile devices when I was doing the operational role in Edinburgh, and probably a bit like yourselves, when there's a training course, it's one of these things that's seen as a have to go to, and I have to say, walking into one of the training sessions, it's the first time I probably walked into such a session and seen that everybody in the room smiling because they can see the positive impact. I know officers have described it as one of the most impactful pieces of kit that they've been provided with in their service. You know, just the simple things that we take for granted with our mobile phone, of being able to send an email, you know, at the point it arrives. For our officers, that seems a given for all of us, but our officers haven't been able to do that until they got their mobile devices, having to return to the office to pick up an email. So in terms of efficiency, again, as Craig's alluded to, it's very difficult to quantify, but in terms of officer efficiency, that, you know, someone can be sitting replying to an email that might have come in from a member of the public for an update to a crime, and be able to reply instead of having to go back and do it at the end of the shifts amongst a number of jobs that they're catching up on. I think the morale element, if nothing else, has been a massive boost for our service. So all positive in terms of what we've had for feedback.
Okay, thanks for that. Is it maybe worth coming back with some other information on that in the next report as well, just so we can monitor that as we're going along? Sort of positives from that new equipment?
Yes, Councillor, I'm happy to put information about that in the next report, and I'll certainly have something that for you.
Okay, that's good. That's quite encouraging. Yeah, thanks for that. Okay, right, we'll move on. The drugs issues, 13 and 15-year-olds, that's very worrying. I just wondered what lessons have been learned from the process here, and what you can do to try and prevent this, especially with children. And also, you mentioned there was an increase in offenders being caught. What percentage of these would be repeat offenders?
Thank you. Yeah, in terms of those people responsible, certainly 13 and 15-year-olds, as you point out there, particularly concerning, and as well, yeah, we're looking to detect people. We're looking to report people for offences, but clearly, when it's a 13-year-old and a 15-year-old, it's more about them being victims rather than people who are accused. And we do have that process in place where, you know, in a 13 and a 15-year-old, I would expect to see a concern for report produced. We should really look at the background to say what can we do and support with other agencies to try to make sure that that's not the start of a path of crime that they're entering into. And the real worry is it's people who are older using people who are 13 and 15 because they know that we'll treat them as victims as opposed to offenders in terms of EEI and other methods. So particularly concerning in relation to that. You mentioned that the percentage of persons, I wouldn't have that information at hand, but it's certainly one I could come back to you on.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah, it's just so we have an idea of if this is new people that have been caught or if it's consistent sort of reoffending. Okay. Okay, we'll move on then.
Sorry, I don't know if it would help as well, just to be aware, you asked about prevention. So
yeah,
one of the real positives for the Falkirk area is the Social Influences Project. So that's aimed at high school children, and it looks at how they can influence behaviours. So it is undertaken, it can look at violence, it can look at alcohol, it can look at drugs. And what it's a very simple premise. What it does is there's an initial input where they take a behaviour type and they ask everybody anonymously to feed back on whether or not they partake of that particular behaviour. And what it shows young people who are obviously hugely influenced by peer pressure is that the perception that everybody's drinking or everyone's taking drugs or everybody's doing whatever, when they do that anonymous feedback, what they realise is actually the majority are those who don't partake of that behaviour, which then influences positive behaviours going forward. So that is ongoing and it isn't undertaken in every local authority area. So Falkirk is in a positive position with that. But as I say, that's something which can be flexed and, you know, to reflect whatever risks or concerns that we would see. So hopefully that gives a little bit of reassurance, but prevention is absolutely key to trying to change behaviours and deaths going forward.
Yeah, okay. You can maybe get some in the next report on that, just a wee bit further information. It'd be quite interesting to see if there's a trend in the responses coming in as well. Okay, thanks for that. Okay, we'll move on. Just the Zetland Park project, or just parks and areas in general. I've seen quite a few issues in that particular area, and the police have been intervening to try and prevent that. But what I'm wondering is, how do you prevent the problem just moving to a different area?
I think from our perspective there, Councillor, I think I've always been aware that when we get reports in, and quite often it might be reports of 40, 50 kids in a park, that 40 to 50 people aren't committing offences. There might be one or two that are engaging in antisocial behaviour. So I'm always keen not to take that line, that heavy-handed line where we go and we just try to get people out of green space, because I think, you know, we want our youngsters in these green spaces, but we want them using them responsibly. So I think it's about working with our partners to try to find those that aren't using them responsibly and deal with them, while still encouraging those that want to use it, particularly with the new facilities that are being put into Zetland Park. Because clearly a heavy-handed approach in a park like that, all it will do is just displace the problem somewhere else, and then we just chase people around about, and we're chasing kids on a Friday night and a Saturday night. So I think it's about understanding the services that are there, the people that want to use them, encourage those that want to use them lawfully, but at the same time trying to identify those that aren't wanting to. So I've always been quite keen not to take that heavy-handed approach to our green spaces, because I think it just, as you point out, just displaces the problem. Okay.
It was mentioned the diversionary tactics are going to be coming in. What other instances of that have happened elsewhere? And what kind of level of positive effect has that had?
I think the diversionary activities can be lots of different things. Certainly over the last year, we've not been able to implement things like that, but it can be things as simple as pop-up football events that we can take part in. There have been some events that we're looking to do in support of Falkirk Football Club in relation to football events running into the evening at times when individuals might be in areas that they're attracting calls from members of the public. If they're then at these diversionary activities, they can be acting with other services that are there. And as the commander here, I'm happy for the local policing team to be involved in these activities as well, because like our school-based officers, these activities give an opportunity for youngsters to see police officers at a time when we perhaps aren't chasing them or reporting them or taking them back to parents, that they see as people with desires and with the abilities to do things other than just a job, and see them on a kind of level playing field. It's almost like taking our hat off and being one with them. So there's quite a few diversionary activities that have been used. I've seen a number in other areas, and I know there were a number in this area, and I'm keen to try to progress as many of these, particularly as lockdown is starting to reduce. but I really do see the benefit of them. As long as we can attract the right people to it, then I think we'll see the benefit in terms of having them in one place where we can then hopefully deliver other services to them and influence their behaviour.
Okay. And do you think these tactics do make a big difference, a noticeable difference to the behaviour in the children?
Yes, I think they do. I think they do, and I think sometimes if they're targeted purely at individuals, that it might cause a bit of resentment against people who don't get that opportunity. So I think when you get activities where you can get a broad breadth of people along, some of who are not going to be causing us issues in public or elsewhere, but those individuals that are there that we want to try to attract, then we can have an impact on them. But my experience is that these are worthwhile doing. And certainly for me to dedicate officers' time to diversion activities, I'd have to be convinced that it was having a positive impact, or I wouldn't have them there. It's like anything that I think it's always a brave decision to withdraw people from anything, but unless there's a positive impact in what we're doing, then I would have my officers doing something else.
Okay, thanks for that.
And I guess one of the things is what we've seen over the years is that sometimes when people behave in a violent manner, it's because of other things that are ongoing in their life at the time. And we've had some really good examples where our school-based officers have looked beyond the behaviour and found out that there were, you know, concerning behaviours at home, and that the perpetrator for your public antisocial behaviour has actually been symptomatic of something else that's not going well in that young person's life, and they've managed to spend the time and understand the behaviours so that we can get other professionals in. And there's been some really good examples of that from the school-based officers across the whole of Falkirk over a number of years on that.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, the school-based officers seem to do a very, very good job, I've got to say. Very impressed. Okay, all right, we'll move on. The community engagement, obviously due to COVID, there's been a lot less you can do, or to do with sort of face-to-face sort of meetings or events. What plans have you got going forward now that restrictions are starting to ease a bit, to sort of engage with the public again?
I think we've always tried to remain visible in public, so and we're happy able to engage with them, albeit it's been through masks and it's been keeping at a distance. We've certainly seen a reduction in the types of meetings we can go to, but we've found other ways of working, and we're using Microsoft Teams where applicable. I know that does not suit every group in terms of what they do, or other forms of communication. It doesn't fit every community council either. So I think clearly there'll be some ground to recover in terms of that community engagement. And whilst there'll be some positives have come out of this in terms of how we want to work moving on, I really want to see these meetings getting back together. And I've missed that opportunity to go and speak to people face to face. And I think that there is limitations to technology, and sometimes sit down with somebody over a period of time gives you that added piece of information and confidence that we're actually doing something. So I'm keen. We're always out in the community. We've been out in the community throughout the period. I think as the community start to come back out, then I would like to see that community engagement just continue, and I'll certainly be encouraging it.
Okay, thanks for that.
I think COVID's given us an insight into how we can work smarter. I would have to say, from my partnership environment, I took on the role a couple of months before COVID came in, and some meetings actually the membership was quite low because we were travelling everywhere, and that limited your availability. So I've actually seen some increased engagement because we've been able to do some of the meeting forums virtually. So I guess for me, I think it's probably a really good opportunity to understand what forums get better engagement virtually and what ones often round about vulnerability. Do we need to do that face-to-face piece to re-engage in a different way, or a more traditional way? But I think probably a blend of how we've done things going forward. I don't think we will fully return to what we did before, but hopefully ask how people want to engage and take that very much into account.
Okay. Yeah, we've noticed some positives, if you like, by doing sort of stuff remotely as well with the council. So yeah, it's important to pick out the positive bits and just to enhance engagement. Yeah. Okay. All right, move on a wee bit then. The fireworks. They can be an issue at the time, but what about other times of the year where people are causing nuisance with fireworks? I'm not talking about people having maybe a couple of wee fireworks in their back garden or something for a kid's birthday or something like that, but ones that are like these loud bangers and things like that after football matches, for example. We've had that recently, and it's been causing a bit of issue over the town, and I'm sure elsewhere as well, with noise, with people's pets and things like that. What can you do to try and prevent that?
Councillor, I think it's quite clear, when you look at bonfire night, we know where the majority of fireworks have been sold, and we work closely with the council to make sure that they're properly managed and properly run. They're holding the right amount of fireworks, they're selling them to the right people. And then we do that piece of work through an engagement through our school-based officers as well, just to get that information out. We engage with the fire service to provide those inputs in schools as well, how these things can be used responsibly. I think it's probably more of a challenge at other times. It's where people are accessing these fireworks and how we would put a stop to that. Are they buying them lawfully, or are they buying them unlawfully? Are they getting them online? And particularly when you talk about things like football and flares, I know from again a previous role that sometimes these things are getting brought back into the country. Maybe not so much just now with travel, but they can be coming in through other means in terms of post and transport into it. And so they're coming from areas that we have no or less control over the sources of them. And clearly that there's an availability of them, because we see that at other events, that when people want to get hold of them, then they can get hold of them, but they're not getting sold through the kind of regular chains and routine that we'd be used to for the likes of bonfire night, where we closely regulate it.
Okay. Yeah, it's a difficult situation, that one, I think. Yeah. Okay. All right, we'll move on then. I've just got a few other questions now. On to, where are we? Speeding. It mentioned that there was a number of people had been stopped for speeding, and they'd been spoken to. However, on the motorway, if you're on the motorway or somewhere that's got average speed cameras, there doesn't seem to be that option of getting spoken to or whatever. You're just automatically done. So, and these are normally in places where there's not really any pedestrians. So I was just wondering if it's perhaps a wee bit too lenient, if people are just getting spoken to in pedestrian areas in the towns and things like that. Should a slightly harsher approach be taken?
Because I think sometimes the figures, when it looks to the number that are warned in relation to this, can maybe give the slightly wrong impression. There is a threshold over the speed limit and where people will be reported or given a ticket, and then a higher threshold still where they're reported to the Procurator Fiscal. So where you've got people travelling a few miles an hour over the speed limit, then it would be quite reasonable and proportionate to stop and speak to them. If it's a road we know that people are speeding, then there's a large amount of these people who we might catch at the speed limit or slightly over, because it's very, very quick, the word to get round now that there's police in an area doing that. And so whilst we're speaking to them for there, we're hopeful that we're still targeting the people that potentially, without the police being there, are travelling at larger speeds. And that's why we do tend to get quite a number of people warned when we do these speed traps, because we don't get the same driver behaviour when we set them up that we would do if we weren't there.
Okay. I noticed that down south they've got speed awareness courses. Is there any plans to bring anything like that in up here?
That's not one I'm aware of. I don't know yourself, ma'am. You're aware of that?
But if someone is charged for various offences, certain offences, careless driving, one of the disposals of those cases does relate to education. I don't know if that's what you're kind of touching on, but we can certainly bring something back that's a bit more detailed round about road safety Superintendent Drew Sinclair chairs the Divisional Road Safety Board Group, so we could give you a more detailed input next time just round about road safety if that's of
Yeah, that
note.
would be useful.
Just-
Yeah.
Yeah,
Maybe
absolutely.
also one of the other things I was wondering about was a number of years ago they used to do what's called the bike safe course for bikers, and that's not been going for a number of years. I just wondered if there was any way that could be brought back in just to help promote safety with bikes.
We could come back to that. There's obviously, my understanding is there is still the fire and rescue piece about road safety, which used to go around all the areas. But again, I can go to maybe David Sharp and just ask if the name of it escapes me, but there were certainly, that hasn't fallen off as far as I'm aware, and that tends to target younger drivers. But we can, as I say, we can look at bringing a more comprehensive report back. That wouldn't be a problem at all.
Yeah, but specifically on the bikes, motorcycles, is it? Can you do on that side? As I
Yeah,
say, they used to do it years ago, but I don't think they've done it for a while. Used to be able to go out with a police officer on a one-to-one, and they would assess you and give you a bit of advice to be safer on your bike, especially for like older blokes like myself that maybe not been on a bike for a while. I did that a number of years ago, and it'd be really good to do it again. And there's going to be a lot of other people in the same situation, especially now after lockdown. You're getting to go out on your bike, the weather's a bit better, etc., etc. So the roads are going to be busy with bikes. So
we can link in with Peter Houston. He's the inspector for roads policing who comes to our daily divisional meeting. So if we can get a quick reply tomorrow, I'll get that back to yourself. But as I say, more than happy that we can present something more comprehensive.
Okay, that's lovely. Thanks for that. Let's see what else have we got. This is on the same speeding page. I just wondered on people travelling during lockdown. What was the approach for people travelling when they shouldn't have been, and sort of how many were stopped, or can you give a wee bit more information on that?
Do you want me to take that one, Craig?
Yes, please. Thank you.
So Police Scotland were really clear in relation to travel that we were not going to focus on that specifically to carry out roadblocks, road checks and do whatever, but what we would do was if there was someone who we came across where there was another offence being committed and it was clear that within that there had been a breach of the travel regulations at the time, that a decision would be made in terms of whether additional charges around that would be preferred. Now we should have reporting that we could bring back round about that, and again we can maybe just take that away to give you some more detail. So just to summarise, we did not specifically carry out road checks or road blocks to catch people out for travelling as they shouldn't have done. But what we did do was our roads policing colleagues had a specific operation which was round about taking the COVID travel piece into their general road safety patrols. Okay,
it's just with the sort of rise in people catching COVID and the deaths and stuff, it might have been useful for to try and minimise the travel. So.
What was clear, there were reports circulated round partners just round about the travel piece. So what was clear was that use of public transport went down significantly in terms of buses, trains, increase in walking, cycling, etc. was seen, and travel by car because people were working from home a lot more went down, but that gradually did pick up. So that information has been circulated, but we could get the figures. There are national figures, and we could bring them back.
Okay, thanks. Okay, just a few other questions then. Let's see now. We're on to page 24. Yeah, the number of domestic abuse incidents reported to the police, that's gone up 4.8%. What I was wondering was, how do I put this? How would you know that that was a true and accurate representation of the figures? What I mean is, because of COVID, if people are at home all the time, is there a possibility that perhaps people wouldn't come forward with a complaint because they were going to be stuck at home? If you know what I mean. Does the COVID situation where people are stuck at home, does that maybe mask an underlying issue where the issue could have actually been higher? Or and how would you know that?
Do you want me to take this, Craig?
Yeah, I was
I think
happy. Okay.
if it maybe gives some reassurance, there was obviously a lot of reporting in the early days that would be a concern, that people wouldn't be reporting, that those who were victims of domestic abuse might be permanently living with a partner who presented a risk to them. So there was a national campaign to encourage reporting and make it clear that whilst everyone was expected to stay at home, that did not mean that you were expected to stay with the same person if that person was a risk to you. And that obviously, of course, you can leave your home address if you're at risk to someone else, or report something to us that means that individual can be prevented from returning there through bail conditions or whatever. In the Falkirk Community Planning Partnership meetings, the domestic violence picture was raised, and what I took away was an action to look at what their stats were telling us, because for me the risk would be around new victims of domestic violence who we hadn't seen before, or if those that we already knew were vulnerable to domestic violence were being victimised more often because they were at home with a partner who presented a risk. And what came back from the analyst's report was that we weren't seeing new risks of new people, and we weren't seeing risks of increased victimisation amongst those that we were already trying to safeguard who had previously been victims before lockdown. So it doesn't really give a particularly clear picture. I'd hope that the analytical piece would maybe be more precise, but it's not. All that we can do really is continue to encourage any victim of domestic violence to come forward as we come out of COVID, and we'll obviously continue to do that. But Craig, if there's anything that you've seen locally that can complement that.
Well, I think it was just I mentioned there, I was surprised at those figures because we really did expect a bigger increase in it. And the only thing I can compare it to is we generally see round about Christmas time where people spend maybe longer in each other's company than they do at other times of the year. We see a spike in domestic violence, and we're expecting to see that over this period of time. So that in terms of an increase isn't that great. But it's what we don't know is probably more concerning than what we do know. And whilst we hope that people have that confidence to come forward, it might be that we'll now see a surge in reporting when people start to move back into their daily lives and their daily routines, and we'll need to monitor that as we're moving forward to see if that's the case. Particularly in relation to new victims as well. I think that's something we need to monitor, and we have seen new victims of domestic crime coming forward reasonably regularly, and some of that is people who then report to us domestic abuse over a period of time. And in support with the new legislation as well allows us to take that action, but it's certainly one that we'll constantly monitor.
Okay, it's good that you've got that kind of background knowledge and experience there that you're using just to monitor that, to keep on top of that. Okay, thanks. Just one other question then. This is maybe a bit of a strange one. On page 26 or page 49, it mentions about the driving licence. People being done for driving licence issues. I just wondered, as somebody who got a letter to renew my driving licence, or it would be void, basically, expired during COVID. The letter came in pretty late to renew my driving licence. Has there been anybody that have been done for their driving licence expiring due to COVID sort of thing, like when you have to renew the wee picture, but has there been any instances of that?
I would need to check, but I fully expect that you know, in genuine cases, you know, in relation to kind of what you're talking about there is kind of fairly minor driving licence type
Yeah.
offences, that there's still an element of discretion there for officers to
Right.
deal with it. So in most occasions, those will be dealt with through that element of discretion. I'm not saying that there won't be any in that limit, and it might depend on the particular set of circumstances as to why that was used, but generally it would be driving otherwise in accordance with a licence that might not classify you to drive that particular vehicle, rather than just a licence that was expired, or a change of address, or something of a more minor nature. But that's not to say there might be some in that number, but I wouldn't expect it to be particularly high.
Right. Okay. I just wondered. Right. Thanks for that. That's me, convener. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ritchie and then Councillor Aitchison.
Firstly, thanks for the report. It's been brilliant. Now, I've got to admit though, I was the one that was having problems, and that's how you were getting all the noise. So I've maybe not got it all. So if I ask a question that's been asked, I'm sorry about that. First one, it's just about results of the violent and disorder and antisocial behaviour survey. How does that compare nationally in other areas of Scotland? I don't know if you've actually said anything in your report when you were talking about it.
I provided some figures, and it was basically that in terms of antisocial behaviour, that we're starting to get back to a kind of sense of normality this year compared to the same period last year, because we saw a number of those offences being kind of COVID related in terms of coronavirus. Unfortunately, the figures for the full year aren't currently available just now, so that there's nothing I can really add to that in context. I'm sure that's something that we're going to get, and that we'll happily share when we do get it.
No, that's not a problem, Craig. That's fine. As I say, I know you were saying a lot. I've actually just went off again when you were talking, but I understand what you were saying. So I was just seeming to be getting disruption quite a lot with my internet. I think you did answer that because I heard you saying this. So again, if you have, I can get it for other colleagues what you were saying. It was the detection rate for sexual crimes within the area, what you call it, they had increased significantly. What's been done with Police Scotland to try and bring them down?
Sorry, Councillor, so the detection rates have increased this year. So you're talking about to actually bring the number of offences down, or the detection rates down?
The offences down.
The offences down. I think in terms of that, it's quite a complicated set of activities that we have undertaken, and it's not just sitting with the police, it's sitting with that kind of multi-agency approach. So we find that where somebody's a victim once, they quite often are a victim on more than one occasion. And so when we do get that confidence for somebody to come forward in that victim-centred approach, it's then how we give them that confidence to make sure they don't become a victim again. And that might be through the distaff scheme that I explained, the power for us to tell them about a current partner or a future partner that they might get, to try to make sure that doesn't become that cycle of offending behaviour and becoming a victim on a regular basis. So it's quite a complicated set of circumstances. Certainly getting a higher detection rate gives us more protective measures, because with that higher detection rate allows us to implement some safeguarding measures in relation to bail conditions, or it could be curfews or other things that we can then try to police, that tries to protect victims. But we quite often see on an occasion where we have a victim that doesn't want those safeguarding measures put in place, that doesn't support bail conditions that we're asking for, and that in itself is a challenge for us to try to take forward.
Right, thank you. This will just be the last one, because I think you have covered it all, so I can ask colleagues. But see, like the warrants that you carry out to going to the house for drugs and whatever. How successful are they? I ken like when it's happening in my area that I represent, I was on Facebook, oh, here's the police coming in with 4 cars, blah, blah, blah. There must be a raid on somewhere. So are they actually proven to be successful, carrying them out?
They're generally very successful. There's very few of those that we end up getting nothing from, and that's because it's intelligence led. To get a warrant, you have to have a sufficient level of information developed into intelligence from either one and more sources that allow us to then crave that warrant. So generally, there's a really good reason why we're going through a door in relation to a drugs warrant. So we quite often, it's very, very frequently, to my experience, that we don't get anything from one of these drug warrant executions. And in terms of the community, I'd mentioned that I think it's important that the community see us carrying out these acts, because they are quite often the people who are supplying us the information that we're then developing. Whilst it might be on other elements of social media, I do discuss that in my daily agenda in terms of social media. And if we've had an incident yesterday, I try to get that information out. And whilst we have to be reasonably vague in terms of the people involved and where exactly it was, generally we can say enough that people know there is action being taken and a consequence to the actions of people that are prepared to deal drugs.
Right, that's great. Thanks, Craig. Thank you.
Councillor Richard, before I let you in, I've got some questions as well. And Councillor Murtagh probably want to make a comment at the end. Could I suggest we have a 5-minute comfort break before we continue? Okay.
Thank you.
Are we ready to go? Is that us all back? Yeah. David, do you want to ask a few questions?
Yeah, there's not a great deal left for me to ask, Jim, to be honest. I was certainly going to highlight the sexual crimes, and it's great news to hear that there's a 20% increase in detection rates, and I was going to just see was there different methodology in the working and things, but Craig certainly answered that in the last question. One of the other points I was like to go back to the public satisfaction survey, and in particular to question 7. And yeah, there's an anomaly with March's figure of 58% for the Falkirk division, which Mandy did touch on. But I'm not familiar with the survey, but is there any area in the survey for people to say what they're dissatisfied with? And is there any, or does the Forth Valley division have any measures in place that could increase the satisfaction rate?
David, what we tend to get back is the stats as you see them. How we measure public satisfaction has been a subject of debate for a long time. And I guess in terms of what we would seek to do in the back of it, I'd maybe just go back to what I'd said. We usually perform very well in comparison to the force results and this month. And while the March ones indicate a dip, I wouldn't want to knee-jerk and make assumptions as to what it does. The sample of calls that are information's fed back from are randomly selected, and again we don't get a breakdown of what those call types are, but as I say, I think probably the bit, if everyone was quite happy, is that we looking at as an anomaly at the moment. And however, if there is something going forward that suggests a deeper concern, which we're not getting a sense of elsewhere, then absolutely we would look to dig into things a bit more deeply to understand what specifically might have fed into that and see what we needed to do on the back of it.
Do you know, Mandy, thanks, do you know if there's any indication whether we go back to telephone surveys? Because I'm sure we all know that online surveys tend to be quite closed and your options are limited in how you can feed back. So sometimes on a phone people can disseminate more information back.
To be honest, David, I'm not an expert in what the current methodology is. By chance, actually, the commander asked me if I was willing to work in a short life working group, which feeds into the confidence and satisfaction piece. So hopefully when I get my invite into that meeting, if there's anything that I can then feed back to everyone round about that, then I would be happy to do so.
Andy, thanks. Thanks, Mandy. Cheers. That's all I have, Jim. Another question I have already been covered.
Okay, I have a few questions myself, and I'll just go through the report. One strange question in page 5, your report, HGV working group, and it's obviously established because of complaints, and set up a temporary car park for these HGVs, and then we've created one on Old Flats Road, Grangemouth, to replace the temporary car park at Union Road. At the end of the report, it says that this one will be a temporary measure only. So, is there any plan? Do you know if there are any plans for a permanent one? Because obviously, people at Grangemouth were wondering about that.
I can be there. I need to come back to you on that. I think that the plan was that this working group is still ongoing just now. So I think the plans are in place. I see somebody else with their hands up who might have the answer that I maybe don't have.
Yeah,
it is ongoing. What we're trying to do is move some of the HGVs out of Union Road car park over to Old Flats Road. That's been looked at now, and trying to maybe provide some temporary facilities for the drivers. They are looking into a more permanent solution, which may be around the Grangemouth area or out with, I'm not sure, but it's not really a council issue as such. So they're going to have to try and get sort of private investment into that. It could be an opportunity for a company to come in and do like a lorry park or something like that. So, but that's sometime in the future. But this is a kind of immediate thing to try and get the HGV situation in Grangemouth calmed down a wee bit, and try and provide something for the lorry drivers. So, but it's an ongoing thing.
okay, thanks for that. The next page, on page 6, drug dealing. We've obviously had a lot of success in drugs seizures. There never seems to be a light at the end of the tunnel. I know, Mandy, you talked about widening your partnership, and speaking in Glasgow and Dundee, which are probably the drug capitals of the country. What effect is that going to have in improving the situation in the Falkirk area?
Are you seeking an assurance that will reduce the supply of drugs into Falkirk? Jim, is that what you're
I'd like an assurance
asking?
that that's obviously not going to be forthcoming. No, but no, I'm just wondering, when you're expanding your partnership work, and you're speaking, say you were consultation in Glasgow and Dundee, you can learn something from there that's going to improve the situation in Falkirk.
I think, to be honest, Jim, what the last year, probably during the partnerships role, I've had a better insight into drug-related death and the complexity of the challenge that is. I think, to be honest, listening into discussions in Glasgow and Tayside is to understand if there's any risks and threats that are being seen there that we might see here. What I was talking about expanding the membership of the group around was, to be honest, we see death, drug-related deaths, and we see what the life has been like at the point of death. I'm chairing the Adverse Death Review Group, or have done the last couple, and the more that I see a bit of it, the more that you realise how complicated the issue is. So, you know, lots of the individuals who succumb to drug-related deaths have underlying health conditions which may have been contributed to through the alcohol and drugs, but also the kind of trauma piece. So I guess it's a big, you know, it's a long journey. I don't think any of us can pretend otherwise. And what we probably need to understand is why people go into the pathway of alcohol and drugs rather than follow decisions that get them into secure employment, that get them into a secure home, that get, you know, all of the things that keep people on a steady path, that help them make the right decisions. And it's really complicated. So I guess in terms of membership, it's to try and make sure as a collective that we look at all of these elements with the complex needs of those who are, you know, at risk of drug-related death, and see how we work together more effectively. And the reality is, as I say, the alcohol, drugs and alcohol and drug partnership are recruiting just now round about new posts to help that coordinating piece. And for our service is to make sure that we put a vulnerable persons report on whenever we should, when we go to an incident that might be a report of a crime, but actually we recognise within it that alcohol and drugs has contributed to some degree to that person being vulnerable at that point in time. And I feel as though I'm not really answering your question, but the reality is there's a national challenge round about drug-related deaths, and Falkirk is no different within that, and there are no quick answers. But I think what we have to do is just make sure that we are as coordinated as we can with services, so that we're not duplicating effort in terms of interventions, and that we're absolutely focusing on those who are the most vulnerable at the moment. Thanks
for that, Mandy. Page 12 of your report, serious organised crime. Now, no, back in the police board days, we always thought that serious organised crime only happened in the big cities, didn't happen in Falkirk. We've certainly got our eyes opened at the time, and as I see we're saying, they're now finding new channels to exploit. I'm surprised that they're stealing clothes for the Salvation Army. That'd be classed as serious organised crime. I didn't realise there was a market that size that would involve serious organised crime. You want to expand on that?
Convener, I put that in there just as an example to say that, you know, wherever we think we understand where serious and organised crime blights in our communities, new things come to see or come to our attention, that we see that. And this is something that we've become known about, is where people dump clothes in these containers, and sometimes with the volume of them, they can be fairly high value when all added together. But it's quite surprising sometimes where serious and organised crime will come out next. They'll always look for a weakness, or look for an area where they can exploit, and then that leads to us in terms of our own operations to try to make sure we do what we can do to protect the communities that they're trying to infiltrate.
Okay, thank you. Page 21, the public satisfaction survey. You've moved from telephone surveys to online surveys. Are you getting a better response? Because there isn't any indication of the number of responses you've had in the report.
What used to happen, Jim, as I say, and Craig, unless you know the methodology better than myself, all that I know is that we used to have a set number of telephone questionnaires that were completed. I don't know how it's managed on the online system, but happy to go and find that out, just so that everyone is clear, just to build on the previous question around that.
Okay, thank you. Page 24, domestic abuse incidents and increasing them. Now, again, back to our previous Chief Constable, used to see a spike in domestic violence incidents based on the aftermath of Old Firm games. Now, we've had 5 this year. Have we seen that as a trend in Falkirk, a spike in domestic violence or domestic abuse based on the aftermath of Old Firm games?
We certainly, most weekends, we do see a spike in domestic crime, because I sit and review it all on a daily basis. I've not certainly seen something that, through my time here, in terms of the Old Firm games, that I've been party to see a great increase, and nothing has jumped out as being particularly different over and above that just standard number of domestic crimes that we see coming in on a daily basis. I know in a previous role I did do a review over a whole number of crimes to do with an Old Firm game. That's when I worked in Glasgow, and one of that was domestic violence, to see what the impact of an Old Firm game was. I think the impact is less the further you go away from Glasgow. I'm not saying it doesn't have an impact, but it's certainly not one that I have picked up on.
I mean, the only reason I'm asking because I certainly previous years constantly used to make a big issue about the spike after an Old Firm game, domestic abuse. When the Bush team won and team lost. Okay, page 25, sexual crime detection rate. Sexual crimes are down, but the detection rate's up. Are you doing something differently that's getting these results?
Certainly, having spoken to our public protection unit, just to try and get a wee bit of context round about that, because that was when I saw that, I wanted to try and understand what the figures showed, and certainly the explanation that they were able to give me was that, you know, potentially that there is a limit to the amount of historic reporting that we get, and that will ultimately start to slow down, and that's perhaps one of the factors that's in play here in terms of this. And then as a kind of follow on, as we have a slowdown in historic reporting, it's more current offences, and more current offences give us better detection opportunities and investigative opportunities, because with them come the ability that if an offence has been committed online, then we've got opportunities to try to identify the person using that particular facility to do online criminal activity, or it might be by telephones, or it might be by CCTV, so things that potentially aren't available when somebody reports something that's historic. So that improves the investigative opportunities, which improves the detection rates. So I'm not saying that's all the factors in play here, because clearly over the last year there'll be a number of factors with people indoors, with less nighttime economy, that will all have had a place to play. But that was the kind of main factors that they were able to give to me that would try to explain those numbers.
Okay, thank you. My last question is on page 26, which is about the road safety and road crime. An increase in dangerous driving, speeding, other kinds of driving licence, insurance. There's been a reduction in cars on the road. But why would this be? With a huge reduction in cars on the roads over the lockdown.
I think from my own point of view, and looking at that, would maybe be the type of individuals that are prepared to drive their vehicles on a road dangerously or not have a licence, are potentially the same people who wouldn't comply with coronavirus legislation. And so on the road, it might be that they're in a bit easier to spot than they would be normally when the roads are busy. And that could be one of the explanations round about that. But I would also say the kind of increased activity and proactivity we have had round about that. We've had some opportunities to do some more proactive work round about it, without getting to the point where we weren't actively checking whether people were out and where they were going, which was never a thing that we were trying to do. But we were able to put in some sort of operations that sometimes we don't have the luxury of doing, because we're dealing with other things. So probably a mixture of two, people being more visible when they are committing those offences, and that increased proactivity.
My last question is around the call centre, and I think Councillor McCluskey touched on it. Call centres are now centralised. You don't have one, I think it's in Edinburgh. We're calling the place, it's Edinburgh. How do you get feedback in the number of calls from the Falkirk area to the call centre? Because I think Councillor McCluskey said one of his constituents maybe phoned 2 or 3 times, and your officers are saying he only phoned once. So how does that relate?
Certainly, convener, when I have access to all the calls that lead to police incidents on a daily basis, so I can go in and look at every one that led to a police incident. And there may well be calls that don't lead to a police incident or are dealt with by another manner of means that we then feed into us through maybe a crime report being raised through another means. But I certainly see the amount of calls coming in, so I can look at that on a daily basis to get an idea of what the demand is over a daily basis, and whether we had any kind of peak in demand. But in terms of the performance information that I think you maybe be hitting on there, in terms of how long it takes for a call to be answered, and how many 101 calls and how many 999 calls, and that's kind of detailed performance information that we would need to get from our contact centre in relation to that.
Okay, thank you. That's all my questions. Thanks very much for your responses. Councillor Murtagh, I don't know if you want to make any comments or not.
Thanks, Convener. That's kind of you. I mean, I first of all would like to welcome Craig formally as portfolio holder. We've been thwarted by COVID-related incidents and meeting up in person, but I think from what we've heard today, we can all feel really confident in how the level of detail and how involved that officers are in putting their money where their mouth is, as it were, in terms of the actual statements which have been made to tackle antisocial behaviour and other areas which we've highlighted as being critical in the current time. I think it's challenging for all of us, and we know that the period we've just lived through and continue to live through, that when you're trying to present a report on any set of historic data, both being able to compare it to what happened previously and even the period that we're now in, given that it changed, where we are now is changes from what is being reported on, is a real challenge in terms of us being able to ask pertinent questions and for you to give real-time answers. So really appreciate the detail given. I just want to say how, from my experience, lockdown and the ability to do Teams calls with officers across the country in our national efforts and the police board efforts and what's happening with COSLA, and the ability to bring in specialised officers to talk to papers and give more detail has been so welcome. There's been a real increase in engagement, and I think that that's translated into how things have been able to be discussed on the ground. I know that Craig is also similarly passionate to myself about community involvement and about the kind of ways where we're used to talking about, for example, our own investment in early years education and ACEs and trying to make sure we're diverting the problems of the future. And I know that his officers are very much engaged in the kind of partnership working and referral pathways at a very local level to try to make sure we're not just dealing with the crimes that are of today, but that we're trying to prevent the crimes of tomorrow by helping our citizens not get involved in circles of crime. So I think that's really, really welcome. That's come across today. And I think there were some questions asked about we are starting to get back. I know that Dennismuir Football Club, we've started back our Twilight Leagues, and that's an initiative which began with Police Scotland. But over the period of lockdown, we've been able to plan further referral integration through Police Scotland and through funds we're also able to partner with to then integrate with other council services too. And the officers have been heavily involved, and perhaps one of our very excellent officers locally won't thank me for mentioning that his active involvement in the Twilight Leagues may have resulted in an injury, which is perhaps preventing him from taking out all of his duties on the ground. But I think that level of commitment is very much on display. So I thank local officers as well as yourselves for coming and giving that level of commitment. But as I say, I think there's some really positive opportunities ahead in the kind of hybrid models that we've got going forward for more community partnership, more working. But I think we're all craving that time to be able to meet up in person as well, get out on our respective beats together and talk about and really discover how we can work better together. So thanks for your report today and the level of detail. It's been really, really helpful and good questions obviously from colleagues. So I certainly took away quite a lot to be able to email you about following the meeting, Craig, so I look forward to that. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you, Murtagh. I know that you just finished by saying that I think it's still one of the safest places in Scotland to live, the Falkirk area. Mr. Purry, do you want to say something before something say?
Convener, just to remind you, I'm now the shadow portfolio holder just in the last month. So
You got your share there.
I'll be linking a lot with officers over the next year. I'm sure. Thank you.
I'll be sorry to hear that.
Thanks, Convener. Normally what would happen is the committee is invited to, whether it wants to just approve the report, ask for a follow-up report or ask for information to be provided separately. I think in this case there's been quite a few follow-up actions which have been asked for, and I think a good few of them, both Mandy and Craig offered to come back with a report. So it might be an idea to ask the police to come back maybe at a later date in the year, possibly October, November meetings, with a follow-up report. And what I can do is link with their offices and with Alan Emery with a list of the actions that have come out from this meeting, and we could get a report that just pulls together all of the pieces of information. Because I think one of the questions had been, could we get a response at the next report? Well, the next report's not due till this time next year, so rather than waiting a full year, if we could just link with the police officers and get a report maybe in October that pulls together everything that's been asked for by the committee. Is that acceptable to you, convener?
So it's something you're happy with?
I'm
Well,
certainly
we could,
happy.
oh,
I'm certainly
John,
happy with
I'm
that,
talking to
convener.
John. Sorry, John,
sorry,
I'm talking
right.
to please, I'm talking to.
Right, okay.
no, I was just going to say, happy to chat through when you would like to see that back. We've not touched on it, but I'm sure everyone's aware of the Conference of the Parties in November of this year, which is obviously going to attract, I believe, 193 member states and potentially 30,000 delegates. So a massive event, and the potential for protest activity in the run-up is clear. So I don't know if we just want to chat through when you might like us to do that, because an update on planning and implications of that I think might be of interest to everybody that's present today. So happy to chat that through.
Yeah, yep.
Convener, I don't know if it would be appropriate. One of the things that I found over the course of, obviously I as portfolio holder get many different briefings and information about specific topics, and that's always really helpful. And part of the challenge is sometimes in briefings where there's maybe sensitive information which is difficult to share, but I think would be of great benefit not only for Councillor McCluskey, who I'm looking forward to working with, but for all our colleagues. And perhaps what we could work on is having some form of briefing of multiple topics, which I think would be of use. There's some developments that are have come through recently. We've had really excellent briefings, and potentially working towards something which would incorporate the questions that have been from the Scrutiny Committee, but also some other topics which I think would be very beneficial to be able to share with colleagues about some of the new ways of working, joint working, and I don't know the timing of that, and I know extremely the pressures that officers are under in some of the events that are coming up later in this year, but potentially in the early autumn or something, that something could be combined to do something like that, and invite all members of the council to be able to participate in that. If that, I think that would be my suggestion, if that would be acceptable to committee as well.
Right, Brian, you finished there?
Yeah, I think given that input, I wasn't really sure what Councillor Murtagh was saying there, but if it's to arrange a separate briefing on the planning for the big operation, then that's something we could look at. In addition, we need to just get in contact and discuss what's required for the follow-up report, and we can discuss the timing of that. I'm not sure the committee would be desperate to set an absolute, it needs to be the next meeting, but certainly before the end of the year. So I can liaise with Mandy and Craig on the timing of the report.
Mandy and Craig, are you happy with that?
Yep, happy.
Yep. Okay.
Convener,
Right.
is 6 months enough? All the questions that David asked to get all that information. I mean, I was just
Right,
thinking,
Councillor
to
McCluskey,
give them
could
time,
we approve the report? Recommendations, agree?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Okay, thank you very much. And Mandy and Craig, thank you very much for your contribution. It was excellent. And I'll close the meeting then.
Thank you, convener.
Okay,
Thanks very much.
great, thank you.
Thanks, everyone.